Preparing. Hi, good morning, everyone. We are live this morning on Facebook for our Wednesday morning live with Brandy and Patricia. Bonjour, Brandy. Bienvenue de tes vacances.
Bonjour, bonjour. Merci beaucoup. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis contente d'être de retour. J'arrive de 2 semaines de vacances.
Ça fait du bien. Moi aussi, j'avais pris des vacances avant. I had some vacation before, so it's nice to have a break. Yeah.
Oh oui, ça fait du bien. I completely disconnected, but I talked about that a little bit in our self-care live on Monday of, just taking some time to disconnect and really basically reconnect with myself and my kids and be more present, So d'être juste plus présent. J'ai parlé de ça cette semaine lundi pour le live qu'on fait en direct là, pour le prendre soin de nous, self-care. So yeah, it feels good, but it also feels good to be back in action and back in a routine or a more stable routine, I should say.
I know I was getting a little confused about what's going on now. What am I doing this morning? So it's nice to be back. And we haven't done a live together in a couple of weeks, so I'm happy to be back.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. So last week, la semaine dernière, Catherine joined me and we spoke about international adoption, because we do have questions sometimes that come about the different types of adoptions you can do in New Brunswick. So on avait parlé la semaine dernière d'adoption internationale. Puis cette semaine, on voulait vous parler un peu de l'adoption en privé. We wanted to talk about private adoption, because I know there's a lot of questions about what's the difference, what can you do, what can't you do. So I thought I would sort of walk you through the process and the questions that come up with private adoption. And Brandy is going to keep me on track to make sure that I also share everything in French. Alors, Brandy va m'aider ici pour faire sûr que j'oublie pas de partager les choses en français. Donc, je vois que Catherine est là ce matin. Catherine here this morning. And she says,
good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I can't really see who's here yet. I'm going to go see on the Facebook page here, just so I can keep track while you're talking. Donc, pendant que Patricia jase avec nous, je vais vérifier s'il y a des questions. Ça va être un sujet quand même intéressant, puis c'est un sujet que souvent on a des questions, on n'est pas très certain comment procéder, c'est quoi le processus, c'est-tu la même chose que l'adoption de la province ou non? Donc, Patricia va nous donner plein d'informations ce matin, puis comme qu'elle dit, on va faire sûr qu'on vous donne l'information dans les deux langues. Puis si vous ne pouvez pas rester avec nous toute la session ce matin, inquiétez-vous pas, c'est dans le groupe, puis vous aurez accès à regarder ça à un autre moment donné quand vous aurez plus de temps.
Exactement. So, first off, I guess, oh, sorry, I have a visitor this morning. Why don't you say hi, and then you're going to go downstairs, okay?
Hello, Lauralie, bonjour.
Je travaille. Okay, sorry. Okay, so first off, private adoption is, and any adoption in New Brunswick, private adoption is any adoption that's not managed through the province. So in Canada, adoption is always managed under provincial jurisdiction. So each province has its own rules about adoption, private adoption, international adoption, etc. So you can adopt privately within the province of New Brunswick. And there is actually a way that you can also adopt privately from another province. Now, if you go that route, you have to consider that the laws in New Brunswick and the laws or processes in another province can be different. So you have to make sure that you take the time to study the laws in both provinces. Today, what I'm going to talk about more specifically is what private adoption is within New Brunswick. So private adoption placements in New Brunswick are usually made directly by the birth parents. So birth parents can place their children for adoption with an adoptive family of their choice. Now, as a perspective, sorry.
Mais peut-être je peux prendre le temps de le dire juste en français, peut-être vite fait. Que Patricia disait que c'est ça, on a différents styles d'adoption ou processus d'adoption au Canada, au Nouveau-Brunswick, puis donc on a, à l'international, on a par la province et on a l'adoption privée. Et puis ce qu'elle disait juste vite, c'est que chaque province a leur propre règlement et leur propre processus. Ça fait que juste d'être certain que vous savez c'est quoi le processus au Nouveau-Brunswick et les règlements comparativement à les règlements et les lois de notre province. Exemple, vous avez c'est possible d'adopter en privé un enfant de notre province, comme exemple en Ontario, sauf qu'il faut que vous sachiez c'est quoi les règlements en Ontario comparativement à les règlements au Nouveau-Brunswick, puis de faire sûr que tout ça est suivi. Et puis là, ça fait que Patricia va nous donner le plus d'informations parce qu'on est au Nouveau-Brunswick. Donc, elle va nous expliquer un peu le processus au Nouveau-Brunswick pour l'adoption privée. Puis là, elle commençait juste à dire que c'est les parents biologiques qui décident. Qu'est-ce que tu as dit qui décide ou qui prend la décision de quelle famille?
Oui, comme c'est les parents biologiques
qui
décident
approuvent.
de placer leur enfant et qui choisissent la famille finalement. Oui, donc ça vient.
Choisissent la famille, oui.
C'est ça, ça commence du côté du parent biologique. Donc, je veux dire, as a prospective adoptive parent, it's important to find out everything you can about your province's restrictions and limitations around adoption. So, the important things to consider when you're looking at private adoptions is what adoptive parents can and can't do to find a child, right? Because that varies across province. So, what are you allowed to do to find a child to adopt? What are you not allowed to do? That's important. It's important to consider the costs and expenses that you might incur through for a private adoption. It's important to know who has to consent for a private adoption. So whose consent do you need? It's important to know who you have to notify and what steps you have to follow to make sure that everything's legal and to understand the time frame of when everything is going to be finalized. Donc, ce que je disais, c'est que les choses importantes à comprendre si vous considérez une adoption privée, c'est qu'est-ce que, en tant que parent adoptif, vous pouvez faire pour trouver un enfant adopté et qu'est-ce que vous ne pouvez pas faire. Une deuxième chose, c'est de considérer les frais et les coûts associés à l'adoption privée et à qui vous allez les payer. Aussi, regardez qui doit donner son consentement pour l'adoption, si c'est le parent, si c'est la province, etc. Donc, et qu'est-ce que ça veut dire ce consentement pour l'adoption? Et aussi, qui vous devez aviser de l'adoption pour faire sûr de respecter les règles de la province et de comprendre aussi le temps que ça peut prendre pour finaliser l'adoption. So that's what I'm going to sort of talk about today.
Okay, and we have a question already.
Okay.
So Catherine's asking, do both parents have to sign over their rights? So, donc, est-ce que les deux parents biologiques doivent signer leur
consentement? Yes, actually, both parents do have to sign over their rights. There is, however, so there are exceptions to that rule in the sense that there are times when maybe the father's not known for different purposes. And in that case, you can get a waiver of consent, but the province has to provide the waiver of consent. So that is a possibility. There is a way to get a waiver of consent from one of the parents, but as a rule, both biological parents have to sign over their rights.
OK, donc les deux parents doivent consentir et puis donner leur consentement, mais il y a des fois, il y a des exceptions à la règle dans le sens que si jamais il y a un parent qui est pas comme le papa est
pas disponible et pas connu,
ouais, la province peut faire la décision.
Exactement, mais il faut faire, dans ce cas-là, il faut quand même que le parent adoptif qui est disponible fasse la demande pour que la province puisse donner le consentement au nom du deuxième parent. Ouais. Here we go. So as we go back to what the process is, so in a private adoption, the biological parent chooses the adoptive parent, makes the placement. I'm sorry. Can you guys hear that? The fighting?
Yeah, that's okay. We can't make out exactly what's going on. We just hear voices.
Oh, so if you are like as a birth parent, if they plan to place their child for adoption outside of their immediate family, then the first step they have to do is notify the Minister of Social Development. You have to notify them by mail in writing 60 days in advance of the placement. So that's a consideration. Also, the person adopting the child, so the adoptive parents, also has to give notice 60 days in advance. And that's what I was talking about, where you have to know who you have to advise. So both the birth parent and the adoptive parent have to notify social development 60 days before a placement. So after they receive the notice of the placement, the minister or social development starts the process of completing the adoption assessment. So they will assess the adoptive family. Now, in this case, what that means is the same thing that we do now, or that they do now for parents who are adopting from the province. They go through the safe home assessment. The one difference is, sorry, I'm just going to close the door. The one difference is they don't have to go through pride training. So it's simply, they complete the safe home assessment, they get approved as adoptive parents, and so on, but they don't have to do the pride training. One other difference also is that if you have provided the 60 days notice and the child is born before the and the child is born before the assessment is completed, you still get to take the child home with you. So there's no gap. Like if the child is born, but everything hasn't been processed, you still get to take the child home with you, and then social development will come and do the assessment while you have the child in your home. So there's no delay there.
OK, on fait juste une petite récapitulation.
Oui, en français. Donc, ce que je disais, c'est que il faut que le parent adoptif et le parent biologique fassent notice au développement social 60 jours à l'avance pour dire qu'un placement et une adoption vont prendre place. Tout ça, il faut que ce soit fait par courrier, à l'écrit. Donc, mais vous pouvez contacter le développement social puis demander, OK, qu'est-ce que je fais à ce moment-ci? On veut adopter cet enfant. Il faut que donc les parents biologiques et les parents adoptifs donnent le notice au développement social. Ensuite, le développement social va s'organiser pour commencer à faire l'assessment des parents, puis finalement approuver les parents comme parents adoptifs. La différence entre une adoption privée et une adoption publique, vraiment, c'est que le parent adoptif n'aura pas besoin de faire le cours Pride. Le parent adoptif quand même fait l'évaluation SAFE. Donc, il va avoir des visites avec un travailleur social, il va venir voir la maison, etc. Et aussi, une autre différence, c'est qu'une fois que le bébé est né, si toutes les notices ont déjà été données, même si l'évaluation du parent n'est pas complétée, le bébé peut venir vivre dans la future maison adoptive jusqu'à ce que l'assessment soit complété.
Oui, c'est ça.
Ouais.
Parfait. Nous avons une question. Can the planning for placement start during the pregnancy? Donc, est-ce que la planification du placement se fait pendant la grossesse? Puis c'est oui.
Oui, absolument, absolutely. Oui. Yeah, as soon as, especially because of the 60-day notice, absolutely, the planning for placement can start before. And if you get a chance to do all that before the child is born, then hopefully you're assessed and ready and the placement. You don't have to be going through the assessment while you have a newborn at home, if you're able to manage that. So,
oui, c'est ça. Puis peut-être tu vas clarifier ça plus tard dans les détails, mais est-ce qu'il y a des adoptions privées qui se fait une fois que l'enfant est né?
Oui, c'est la même chose. Il y a quand même le 60 jours d'attente. Et là, c'est vraiment... ça se peut se faire, mais la majorité du temps, l'enfant, dans ce cas-là, est pris par le département du développement social. Donc, les parents adoptifs vont donner leurs droits au département du développement social et c'est eux qui vont trouver une famille. Donc,
mais là, ça devient une adoption publique.
Publique, oui, mais ça peut se faire en privé aussi. C'est juste, je pense que ce qui se passe dans ce moment-là, c'est qu'est-ce qui arrive à l'enfant entre-temps. Parce que si c'est un placement avec un membre de la famille immédiate, ça peut se faire automatiquement. Si c'est avec quelqu'un qu'on connaît, mais qui n'est pas famille immédiate, là, il faudrait que je fasse un petit peu plus de recherche pour m'assurer vraiment qu'est-ce que c'est.
Oui, c'est ça. OK.
Ouais. OK. Je m'excuse. Est-ce que vous entendez encore la chicane, là?
Tu fais, mais c'est pas grave. Hey, mes enfants ont crié pour 2 heures hier soir. C'est ça que je te disais. Des fois, c'est juste, c'est ça.
Non, ben,
Je
je suis
ça va.
toute seule à la maison aujourd'hui, alors je n'ai pas grand-chose à faire, là. OK.
Mais hey, si tu as besoin d'aller, là, il n'y a pas de trouble. Moi, je peux continuer ce site pour un petit bout.
OK. Je vais faire un petit peu, puis après, je vais aller voir ce qui se
OK.
passe, puis je vais revenir, là. OK. So I'm apologizing for my screaming children in the background. I'm home alone today, so I thought I had them settled, but I guess they're having a disagreement. So I'm going to do one more part and then let Brandy translate, and I'll come back in a minute. So, okay. So where was I here? I'm looking at my notes. Okay. Okay, so all right, so after placement and after the assessment, before the adoption is legally confirmed and legally completed, just like a public adoption, the child must live with the adoptive parents for a minimum of 6 months. And again, just like when we do a public adoption, there is visits after the placement and evaluate and see is this going the way it is. And then you still have, as an adoptive parent, you still have that time to go, okay, yes, I'm doing this and I'm signing on and so on. So there's 6 months after the placement before the adoption is finalized. Now, a second reason that that happens is because there is that 6 months also allows for the birth parents the 30 days that they're allowed to say to change their mind. Basically, they have 30 days after consent. After they give consent, they have 30 days to revoke the adoption consent.
So I wonder if this is the question Catherine's asking. She's saying, when can the termination of parental rights be signed? But kind of fits into the question a little bit, or no?
When I'm trying to understand what she means, when can the termination of parental rights be signed?
Maybe like at what part of the process? Because they have 30 days to revoke. Ils ont 30 jours à reprendre sur leur décision. Ça, c'est les parents biologiques, right?
So, yeah. So it's they like determine they give up the rights. I think when they give the consent. So when the biological parents give the consent to adopt, they have given up their parental rights at that point, and that's signed. But they still have 30 days to go back on it.
So il y a un 30 jours après la signature. Puis après ça, une fois que l'enfant est placé chez toi, comme parent biologique, tu as 6 mois que les travailleurs sociaux ils viennent faire leur visite, ils continuent de voir si tout va bien. Et puis, toi, comme parent biologique, adoptif, tu as 6 mois à voir si c'est quelque chose que tu continues.
Okay, and Catherine adds it can't be signed until the baby's born. Yes, sorry. So when the baby's born, like you can't sign away rights of a baby that doesn't exist, I guess. So when the baby's born, that's when the termination of parental rights can be signed once the baby's born. But they still have 30 days after consent for adoption to go back. Okay. Let's see here. What else did I have in my notes?
And the consent is signed with a lawyer?
Yes. So you need both the biological parents and the adoptive parents will need to get a lawyer involved to get all that paperwork done. And depending on the agreement that you have with the biological parents, sometimes you take on that cost or they take on that cost. That's really something that you have to agree one-on-one. Every case is different.
Yeah.
So here, I'm just looking here, make sure I have everything covered for the placement. Consent in both both biological parents must consent. We covered that. Or the consent must be waived by court after the biological parents are given the opportunity to respond. We've covered that. Yeah, card waived. let's see here. A teen parent under the age of 19 may consent to the adoption of their child. In a private adoption, either parent required to give consent can change their mind if they put it in writing. Once the court makes the adoption order, the birth registration papers will be changed, and generally the biological parents lose all their legal rights and responsibilities to the child. Normally, the adopted parents will change the surname and first name of the child. That's after the finalization.
C'est après le 30 jours que le parent peut retourner sur leur décision.
So, and says an adoption order may be appealed to the New Brunswick Court of Appeals within 30 days of the order. So that's the whole consent and the parents going back. Okay, so one thing that I wanted to mention, looking at revocation. Okay, and I don't know if we want to go into if it's go into this or not. If there's question about like if the parent revokes their consent, what happens? I can talk about that, but that's a little, you know, like there's a question about you have to follow the law, you have to return the child within 2 days. I can go into details if there's questions about it, but if not, we can just save that for if somebody wants to connect with me specifically and ask about that. I can go over that with you.
Oui, fait que si vous avez des questions plus spécifiques, qu'est-ce qui arrive si jamais que le parent décide qu'il ne veut plus consentir au placement? Et puis, qu'est-ce qui arrive une fois que l'enfant est déjà placé chez vous? Puis, qu'est-ce qui arrive? N'hésitez pas, contactez-nous, on peut vous guider avec ça. Mais je pense qu'on va, we're going to move on a little bit further into, I think a lot of our participants or people from the community often just wonder or ask, like, can they find their own family? Or can they solicit their own family? Ou est-ce qu'ils peuvent, tu sais, il y a beaucoup de questions alentour de, bon, moi je vais adopter, est-ce que je peux trouver ma propre famille?
Oui,
ou la propre maman pour adopter? Ou, je pense qu'on va parler aussi un peu de ça, là.
C'est ça, donc, exactement.
Openness options, question mark.
Yeah, openness options. So, one of the big questions, like Brandy's saying, is how can I find a child, right? So here's the thing. With private adoptions in New Brunswick, and this varies province to province, but in New Brunswick, it's clearly stated that any kind of solicitation or advertising is forbidden. So it is, there are legal consequences. You cannot advertise to find a child. So it's no person shall publish or cause to be published any form or by any means an advertisement concerning the placement or adoption of a child. So it comes from either side. You can't, as a birth parent, you can't actively look for an adoptive parent. And as a potential adoptive parent, you can't actively search for a child. So what that means is you have to have a personal connection to someone who, you know, is saying, I'd like to, I'm considering an adoption for my child or whatever. So,
est-ce qu'il y a des détails sur, on peut répéter ça en français, là, mais est-ce qu'il y a aussi des détails sur qu'est-ce qui inclut une connexion personnelle? Mais peut-être tu peux répéter first en français. Là, mais...
Ouais, donc, je disais juste qu'une personne ne peut pas faire de publicité ou de demande publique ou d'affichage pour essayer soit de trouver un enfant qu'une famille veut placer en adoption ou ne peut pas non plus dire j'ai un enfant que je voudrais placer en adoption. Au Nouveau-Brunswick, c'est absolument interdit de faire ça. Donc, il faut qu'il y ait une connexion personnelle à la personne qui est enceinte pour que vous discutiez d'une adoption. Donc, c'est vraiment quelque chose qui se fait personnellement avec quelqu'un que vous connaissez. Il n'y a pas de détails plus que ça. J'ai révisé les lois, j'ai révisé la Families Act. There is no more specific legal information that I could find. I reviewed the Families Act. What I would say is you can, that's why getting a lawyer, like you were saying, for all that is the important thing, really. That's one of the first things you should do actually with private adoption too, is get a hold of a family lawyer and go, okay, what can we do? Especially once you've found someone, or I shouldn't say you found someone, but once you've connected with someone you know and you're discussing adopting their child, it's important to get a lawyer involved right away.
Oui, ça c'est important d'aller avec un avocat tout de suite pour faire sûr que tu suis les règlements et les lois de la province. Puis, Catherine demande une bonne question. Puis par rapport, je disais juste, est-ce qu'il y a des restrictions? C'est quoi les restrictions par rapport à savoir c'est quoi un personal connection, une connexion personnelle avec la personne? Ça, Patricia disait comme, c'est ça, il n'y a rien plus en détail, mais ton avocat pourra probablement, pas probablement, il pourra te guider là-dedans. So, like Catherine, not Catherine, sorry, Catherine does have a question though. Patricia was saying, just make sure you seek out the lawyer so he can guide you or she can guide you in the more specific questions of what a personal connection actually means. Is it someone in the family or is it a friend or,
So, yeah, I would also answer Catherine's question. Say, she says, can you give examples of what solicitation would look like? So it would specifically be maybe going on not something that we would do nowadays, I would think, but putting an ad in the paper and saying, family looking to adopt newborn. You can't do that.
Now it would be an ad on Facebook, basically,
yeah, or
right?
An ad on Facebook, even to say, does anyone know a young girl who, has a pregnancy and is looking to for an adoption plan for her child? You can't do that. It's really a matter of someone you have a personal connection with, someone someone's daughter, a friend, someone you work with. So someone you have that personal connection with. You can't advertise at all. Mm-hmm. So, does that answer your question, Catherine?
Yeah, she's saying, especially in the age of social media. Yeah.
Yeah.
People might not realize they are yeah. So like, for example, right? So you're part of a group, maybe on Facebook, and then, or maybe even through like, well, not our group, but any group on Facebook, and then someone may say, oh, hey, do you guys know anyone? Or maybe the birth mother saying, hey, is there anyone out there that'd like to adopt my child? And you don't know each other, that's soliciting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes it's unintentional too, as parents or as people who are looking to adopt children, who are looking to become parents. It's easy to say, I'm really looking to help. I want to help a child. Is there anyone you know? And we're just not allowed to do that. So the same thing, if you see someone who posts and says, oh my goodness, I've just found out that I'm pregnant, I don't know what I'm going to do, and who might be looking for support online, you cannot contact that person directly and offer to adopt their child if you do not already have a personal connection and know them, right? The best thing you can do at that point, if you see someone who might be in distress and who says, I have, I need support, I don't know what to do, I would say direct them to birth parent services through social development, and they can get the counseling they need, they can get the support they need, and they can see all the options that are available to them. And if they choose adoption, that then they can get the support they need that way, and they can get counseling and so on. So, yeah. But we can't jump to that. I mean, people in that situation too are also in a very emotional situation, and rather than make a rash decision, or they really need that counseling, and they need to, think through, decide what they want to do. So it's not the time to say, hey, can I have the baby? Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
Again, comme Patricia mentionne souvent, c'est pas parce qu'on veut faire de tort ou rien comme ça, c'est parce que we usually have a genuine want to help, and we're looking for, we'd like to be a parent. So sometimes we get emotional too, and asking these questions, we don't mean it wrong, but yeah, it's against the New Brunswick laws and regulations. We have on a quelqu'un d'autre qui demande une question, Shani.
How does step away?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, Shani. Good morning. How does a word of mouth work in this then? So, do you mean like how do we find out that there is a possible child being, or a possible parent wanting to put their children, or maybe considering adoption? Is that what you were asking, Shani? Donc, je pense que la question, c'est comment est-ce qu'on fait pour se parler de bouche à oreille d'une possibilité d'adoption. I'll attempt to answer your question, Shani, and I'm thinking still has to do with a personal connection to the family that is looking into adoption.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I was just
I hope my
attempting
mute
to.
worked.
Hey, sorry.
I said, I hope my mute worked.
So we have a question, and I answered it, but we're just going to get your input, Patricia. Oh my goodness, something's going on with my computer. Okay, so Shani's asking, how does word of mouth work in this then? Like a friend of a friend knows a birth mom. Can I approach that person to adopt their child?
No, no. I would say in that case, if the person you know, um, it's really complicated. Honestly, I
I know
would
it's
talk to a
very
lawyer
touchy.
about
It's
it.
very touchy. It's very touchy. I find it gets people in confusion. You know, it
Yeah.
confuses people of what it actually means to have a connection.
I
And how
guess,
does this even go about, right?
yeah, what you have to consider, right, is we're trying to make sure, and these rules are in place to make sure, honestly, it's to stop child trafficking, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure we're not coercing people who are in difficult situations to make decisions that they might not be ready for. So we want to
Yeah.
make sure that everyone's educated, everyone's supported, and so on. So if something like that is the case, I personally, I would, if they're thinking of placing their child for adoption, I would recommend then that they go through again, um, what did I call it a minute ago? Birth parent services, and then together perhaps, and then see from there. There's nothing to say you couldn't be introduced to that person, but you can't be introduced to that person and then say, okay, I'll take your baby. Like, it's it's really it's a difficult line. Catherine, I don't know if you have anything to add. I know you're watching too.
So she adds to, what if the birth mom connects with me because she found out about me through a friend of a friend?
So that's different. So if the birth mom is approaching you, I think that's the important thing, is if the birth mom approaches you, that's different. It's when as the adoptive parent, you're making the approach that it could be iffy. So in the case that you were saying, Shani, if a birth mom connected with me because she found out about me through a friend of a friend, then that's the birth mom's connection. She's approaching you. What you
And that
can't
birth mom
do.
still has to go through a lawyer and make sure she's doing this planning because
Yeah.
it's from her own will and she connected with you because,
Yeah, and honestly, as a potential adoptive parent, I would welcome the connection, but I would also encourage her to get the counseling and get the support that she needs to really be sure in that decision. And because by doing that, you're protecting yourself and you're protecting her, right? You have to think again, these are people who are in very delicate situations, and maybe there might be fear involved. They might be thinking this is the way right now, but 6-7 months down the line, all of a sudden they're going, is this really what I want to do? You're expecting to adopt the baby, and then they might say, I'm not ready for this, and turn around and say no. So by making sure that person gets the support they need and all that, like I said, you're protecting both them, the child, and yourself. Does that answer your question, Shani?
Yeah, and Shani and Catherine are kind of having a little discussion. So Catherine would just say, I would say that the birth mom can ask you if you have met them, but you can't ask them to adopt their child. So Shani's saying, okay, so birth moms do have the right to choose who she wants to adopt her baby.
But she
Yes, but
has
she
to know
has to
them.
know them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she has to know them. And also, you have to keep in mind that the adoptive family has to be approved. They have to be assessed and approved by social development. So you can choose, you can start the process, but they still have to be approved by the province. So you can choose who will be evaluated and approved by the province, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because as a birth mother, if I say, okay, I know Patricia, I want Patricia to adopt my child, but you cannot adopt my child till social development says yes, you can.
Exactly. Social development says, yes, you're an approved adoptive parent. Okay. And Shani says, yes. So I've answered her question. Thank
Okay,
you.
super.
I know these are difficult discussions and we're trying, that's one of the reasons we wanted to have this live, because it's so up and down. And again, I'll reiterate, talk to a lawyer. You want to make sure that
Yeah.
everything is, because the last thing you want to do is right when you finalize things that they go, no, this can't happen. It didn't go the proper way. And please keep in mind that all this is to make sure we're protecting the kids. That's all it is. We'll make sure we're protecting the babies, and that they're not being taken advantages, and they're not being, moved around without being protected. So.
C'est ça. Puis ça, en général, juste en français, vite fait, c'est que vous devez vraiment avoir une connexion avec la famille qui décide ou qui pense à l'adoption. Et puis, vous ne pouvez pas aller de l'avant puis dire « Je peux prendre votre bébé ». Il faut vraiment que ça vienne de la famille ou de la maman. Et puis que c'est elle qui demande. Puis même si c'est elle qui fait la demande, qu'elle aimerait ça, que toi, comme famille, développement social doit l'approuver de toute façon. Fait que, comme Patricia dit, de faire certain que vous allez de l'avant avec un avocat pour faire, oui, encore là, pour faire certain que tout est dans les règlements.
Et Catherine ajoute, like any other adoption, the final decision is up to the family court judge. So it's the person, the judge who finally signs off and says, yes, this is good to go. Donc, la décision finale, c'est au juge de la famille que ça vient, puis c'est eux qui décident. Now, we had a question to, and Suzanne says, sorry, it's hard because it's so emotional. Yes, absolutely. It's hard because it's so emotional on every front, right? It's emotional for the birth parents, emotional for the hopeful parents. So yeah, we had a question about openness. That's one thing that I wanted to add, that we talked about, what can be difficult with private adoption, what advantages to private adoption. So one thing that's a big advantage to private adoption is that the birth family, right? So you can have a lot of medical history, you can answer the questions, and a lot of the time with private adoption, there's the option to keep it open. You don't have to, and those are things that you can discuss with the birth family. Those are things that you can finalize in your adoption agreement, so on. But a lot of times with a private adoption, you can have an open adoption and you can have a relationship with the birth parent, and they become something special, someone special in the child's life. It's not like they have two parents, they just have someone special that they can look up to, or that they can have a special bond with, and it's that biological connection. So you also have the history and so on. It's a special connection. I see here, there's another question from Shani, sorry.
It's a comment.
It's very difficult discussion and very hard for both sides to understand. I really appreciate these lives. Our family has adopted twice privately, but we get questions all the time, and it's good to know up to date on the info.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that, Shani. It is difficult to understand for both parties, right? To really see what can we do and what can we say, and comment on peut aller de l'avant avec tout ça.
So, and Catherine says it's in the best interest of the birth family and adoptive family to put it into a legal document with your lawyer. Yes, whatever openness agreement you come up with, make sure that you discuss it with your lawyer and you have it written and it's legally put in the document, so that you can, if you choose to restrict visits to a certain amount, if you choose to say, or to have specific, and from both sides, from the birth parent side and for the adoptive parent side, what you're ready to give and what you want to have as visits, or what kind of contact you have. We've spoken a little bit about open adoption before, and contact can mean letters, mean emails, can mean sharing photos through Facebook, or it can mean annual visits, monthly visits. It can mean so many different things. So it's important, like Catherine said, to have it in writing with a lawyer and with the birth family.
Oui, donc par rapport à la question d'ouverture d'adoption, puis de voir si que vous allez avoir une entente que la famille biologique ou la maman biologique est quand même dans le portrait, une fois que l'adoption est passée, c'est vraiment dans votre meilleur intérêt de aussi avoir les documents légaux qui confirment c'est qu'est-ce que vous avez décidé qui allait englober l'ouverture d'adoption. Fait comme Patricia mentionnait, ça peut dire beaucoup de choses. Fait ça veut dire c'est vous qui entendez sur quelque chose. Ça peut être une fois par année, une fois par mois, à travers des photos, des lettres. Il y a tellement de façons qui veut dire qu'on peut avoir de contact, mais c'est de vraiment faire certain que c'est dans les documents légaux.
Oui, absolument. And so I hope we've covered everything. I know we've already gone sort of past the regular time. We talked a lot today. And again, I apologize for the constant interruption. I did want to add a little something, and I will paste it in the comments. So it's really where you can get legal help for that. So I'll read you a little blurb that I've gotten from the New Brunswick lawyers, and it says, if you're interested in starting a private adoption process, you will need to hire a family lawyer to assist you. It's always a good idea to get your legal advice about your situation before proceeding. You can speak to a private lawyer of your choice, or you can contact the Family Advice Lawyer Services. And there's a toll-free number I'll share. You can do that to set up an appointment for a free consultation with a family law lawyer. And then they also provide 2 direct numbers for those in the St. John and Moncton area, where you can connect with the offices to get some free initial legal support and then some direction on where you need to go further for additional services.
OK, donc on a une couple de commentaires, mais avant, je vais dire ça en français. Fait que Patricia nous laisse savoir que si vous voulez commencer le processus, juste avoir des renseignements légaux, elle va mettre dans les commentaires le numéro que vous pouvez téléphoner. Vous pouvez soit choisir un avocat privé ou il faut que ce soit un avocat de la famille. Puis, vous avez des sessions là, gratuites au début, puis ils peuvent vous guider là, plus loin dans le processus.
Exactement. Donc, je vais copier ça dans les commentaires, comme j'ai dit, pour que vous ayez les numéros et l'information. Oui, puis c'est ça. J'espère qu'on a répondu à vos questions. Puis, je pensais ça. As-tu dit qu'il y en avait une couple de commentaires?
Oui, 7 minutes, je vais aller voir ici. Oh my goodness. Attends. Là, j'ai
I know, I lost my way.
I'm like, what's going on? Okay. Is it in the best interest of the birth family and adoptive family is to put, okay, sorry, that's Catherine. So we have Suzanne. For people in the field, we are sometimes approached to be a third party facilitator. This is not legal.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we have Shani saying it would be really helpful to have another live like this about adopting privately from different provinces and territories. Yes, good one.
I agree, Shani, that it would be very helpful, but I don't think we're the right people to have that, to be honest, because it's so different in so many provinces and there's so much information. I think it would take a lot of research on our end, and I don't know that we'd be able to answer all the questions. When it comes to adopting from a different province, I would really, really go back to saying contact a lawyer, get a hold of the department or the agency, because it works so differently in that province, and do your research and find out what they do in specifically, like what the requirements are in those regions. I will also add that everything we've covered today for private adoption may not work the same if you're looking at adopting some from First Nations. So they have their own regulations and there are some different things. So I cannot state that it would be the same thing. If you're adopting a First Nations child, there might be other things that you have to consider. And again, a lawyer would be the best person to answer those questions for you. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hopefully we've answered all your questions. J'espère qu'on a répondu à vos questions. Et puis, je pense que c'était vraiment informatif aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup, Patricia. I think it's very informative today. And we will continue to do these lives. And maybe next time we'll talk about step-parent adoption and different types. We will continue providing information and guidance on different types of adoption. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please reach out. There's no like right or wrong question. And thank you, Shani, for, posing some questions because, yeah, people need to be informed. Je crois qu'il n'y a pas de mauvaise ou bonne question. C'est juste, demandez vos questions, on est ici pour vous.
Absolument. And Suzanne adds, we could try to find some resources about this. Absolutely. We can absolutely try and find resources to point you in the right direction when it comes to adopting private adoption through
From
other
another
provinces. Like I said, though, they are the best ones to answer the questions, but we can definitely find you some contacts for that. Maybe that's what we should do, find contacts for that information in other provinces and open the doors that way.
Yeah, and I really like to do a quick takeaway. So for me, like the quick major takeaways is that you cannot solicit, so you cannot be the adoptive parent asking the birth parent. You got to wait or have a connection, and you got the birth parent has to reach out and ask you.
Yes.
So, and so important to get legal advice and get your lawyer, and that there is rules and des réglementations qu'il faut absolument suivre. Is there anything else for a takeaway? A quick takeaway is
I would say the same thing. Even if you're approached by a birth mother or a birth parent, remember that they need as much support through this as we do. So I would say, again, it's important to encourage them to get the counseling or to talk to the people they need to talk to. And even if that means reaching out to birth parent services. Now, just because they've reached out to birth parent services doesn't mean the adoption has to go to social development. It's really just to help them through the decision
process the emotional and the decisions. And yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Perfect. Bon, ben, j'espère que ça vous a aidé ce matin. I hope this was helpful. And again, feel free to reach out to us. We are here for you. On est là pour vous.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you next week. Have a good day.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.